Welcome to the Workbench and welcome to another episode of Wheels Wings TV. Today we finally have the long-awaited Airfix 1/72nd scale Bristol Beaufort. About damn time. Let's have a look. First up, we have our upper and lower wings. Some relatively decent panel lines. Not horribly wide, not too shallow. Still not as square cut and sharp as I would like, but unfortunately that's a byproduct of the relatively soft plastic, although this stuff seems a little bit stiffer, so maybe they're taking heed of everybody's complaints and using plastic that's not Play-Doh. Because of course the harder the plastic, the sharper the detail you can get in it. So that looks pretty good. I think that's flaps. Flaps? Question mark? So far, so good. Next we have our engines, engine cowlings, nacelles. Looks like a little wing spar with a bulkhead. I assume that's our bomb bay doors with, I assume that's the bomb bay itself. We've got our propellers. Looks like some cockpit bits, a bit of wing spar. Engines. Not too bad. The Bristol radials, the British radial engines are always kind of deceptively plain looking. They didn't have the same really prominent ribbing, cooling fins and push rods that the big American radials had, so they always look kind of basic in comparison, but these ones aren't too bad. Could maybe be a little bit sharper, but perfectly acceptable once you get them stuffed in the cowling, behind the mounts and the exhaust collector. They'll look just fine. That's some ejector pins, some deep suckers in our engine nacelles there, so that's going to be our wheel wells. Probably not going to be super visible, but we might want to fill those perhaps. We'll see. Depends on how many cares we have to give. Get some in our engine cowling here as well, although I don't expect you'll be able to see those. And those, and that's closed wheel wells, so those ones probably aren't of concern. Not too bad. And we've got our fuselage halves, which, okay, so we've got a very prominent bit of wing root sticking out here, and they have very kindly added these big blades to the sprue, so those do not get bashed off in transit, which is nice. More acceptable panel lines on the fuselage. Little, maybe a little bit soft just because there's a bit more of a curve going on. But not horrible. Wheels look good. Maybe a little bit soft, but not too bad. Nicely weighted, which is good to see. Get our tail planes with some subtle fabric scalloping on the elevator and the rudder. And of course, the elevator itself is molded to 1/2 of the tailplane, and then the body is a separate half, so you always end up with a slightly sharper trailing edge, which is nice. And Looks like we got some of our landing gear legs. Hopefully those aren't too spindly. Okay, we do have some structure molded to the inside, along with some big old ejector pins, so it's going to be hard to say which ones of these are going to be really noticeable. I have a feeling these ones up in the nose, perhaps, are going to be the worst offenders. Back here, it's probably not going to be a huge deal. But we'll have to wait. And these ones on the landing gear, those I can't see those not being visible. So, but we'll have to look at the instructions. Got various small bits and pieces. Got tail wheels. We've got some clunky looking Vickers gas operated machine guns. Some more landing gear components. Yeah, I definitely think Airfix is maybe using, at least on this one, they used a different plastic, because this is, I mean, it's nice and hard. It's actually greasy though, so all those myths about mold release might actually be right on this one. So you might want to hose down your Beaufort kit before you paint it, just to be on the safe side. Those little boxes and seats for the interior. Little soft, little clunky, but depending on how atrociously thick the canopy is, probably won't make a huge difference. We'll see. We do have, whatever these pieces are, we do have some corresponding sink marks on the outside where these little studs are, so we might need to level those down. And last of the gray parts, we've got our torpedo. We've got a Browning machine gun. So obviously some catering to some different variants, because we've got a Browning here. We had Vickers guns on the previous one. We've got some little nubs and bumps and scoops and more landing gear. Yeah, there's definitely some sort of something on these sprues, so I don't normally wash my plastic before I start on them. These ones might need some detergent or some Fantastic or something, because there's something on there. Anyway, some more nice fabric dishing, scalloping on the ailerons there. That's very nice. We got our little buddy here. He's a little soft looking. Yeah, I don't put pilots in my planes anyway, but instrument panel looks okay. Yeah, oh, got some. I think that's our landing gear. Main wheel well doors. Some nice detail on the inside and no ejector pins, thankfully. So she's a little greasy, boys, but she's not too bad. And lastly, we have our clear sprue. So we've got our main canopy, the nose section, got our gun turrets, landing lights, wingtip, and oh, that's an interesting way of doing it. So we've got our football fairing here around our DF loop. which is molded in left and right halves, which is kind of annoying for a clear piece, but they've given the impression of the actual metal loop on the inside, so if you carefully paint that, it's going to look like you've got that loop embedded in that clear piece. So the careful attention there should pay off. And of course, yeah, pretty good in the distortion department, so looks like whatever you stick in there, you're going to have a decent chance of actually seeing it, which is always reassuring, unless you suck at painting cockpits and then, you know, you're not hiding anything. Relatively not super sharp, but definitely prominent framing, so that shouldn't be a huge chore to mask. Or you can get some pre-cut masks, but that's not too bad at all. And of course, our instructions. Blurb on the Beaufort, a few specs, usual. Yeah, no kidding. Surfaces to be painted should be clean. Wash in warm soapy water. Normally I would consider that a bunch of wish-wash, although on this one, definitely wash your Beaufort before you start playing with it. Assembly instructions, blah blah blah. And on to it. No, when building model with torpedo, I don't know why you wouldn't, it is a torpedo bomber. Drill out 3 holes in part C18 and refer to steps 95 to 101. So a couple of holes here for the torp. And we've got some seats going on to our main spar, which then goes on top of the bomb bay. I assume that's probably the radio fit. Okay, so this is probably the wireless operator station, which you're definitely never going to see. And that goes in place. Make sure this is 90 degrees. Thanks for telling me, but having positive engineering here to ensure that these angles are 90 degrees would be much preferable. And we got our cockpit sidewall, cockpit floor, got our seats going in, got our instrument panel with its decal, rudder pedals, bulkhead, I guess, firewall, well, bulkhead. Control yoke. I'm going to assume that's the bomb aimer's seat, seeing how it's up in the nose. I'm assuming that is going to be the potty, the chemical toilet. Help you if you have to take evasive maneuvers. I believe there was a seat belt installed for just such an emergency. Got an access door with some clear parts. Now they're saying to trim down this fairing here. So I'm assuming that's going to be variant dependent. So I think depending on which gun turret was fitted will dictate this fairing here. I know the Australians did some different things with that, but I believe there is a resin conversion kit out for that. When assembling gun option, fit part D16 and refer to steps 105. So you do have the option of fitting the beam guns there if you so choose. Interior slots in, nice big wing spars. Got some more floor going into the nose, so looks like I probably won't have to worry about those ejector pins down there because you're never going to see that underneath this. I guess that's not a floor, I guess that's a table for the navigator or bomb aimer, perhaps. some rear bulkheads around the tail wheel. Another internal bulkhead. Once again, removing that fairing around the gun turret. Bring our fuselage halves together. Turret fairing. We get some front and rear bulkheads for the bomb bay. Upper and lower wing halves go together with our landing lights. So get in there with a little bit of chrome paint, make those stand out. Wings go on to the fuselage, and then optional flaps for A or B scheme dependent. Ailerons, tailplanes, rudder, and then get our landing gear in place. Looks like it should be relatively strong. Some rear bulkheads. Nacelle halves going together with the firewall. So it looks like the uppermost part of the landing gear is going to have to go in before the nacelle. And we got some scoops. We got our engine. And obviously, I guess make sure that this little dingus is pointing up. Got our exhaust collector ring. Left and right cowling halves. Cooling fins. Exhaust pipe. And that goes in. Of course, this is, looks like these are actually keyed, so you can't get the wrong one on the wrong side. So wash, rinse, and repeat for the other engine. The cockpit glass going in place, the side glass, and the nose panels going all in. Hopefully all these fit together well. I guess if you're not doing the torpedo, you've got your closed bomb bay doors. And I'm assuming if you're doing the torpedo, you've got these front and rear doors inwards and no center doors. Or they just open. Okay, so that's... Okay, so I guess this is unloaded and that's with torpedo loaded, I guess. Okay. Wheels go together. Kind of like the Blenheims and the Bolingbroke. The gear struts are attached to the doors. So hopefully there's enough flex in there that you can paint these wheels up and pop them into place later on. Of course, that's for the wheels up option. Tail wheel. And then our primary landing gear struts and whatnot come all together. And those you should definitely be able to add together after painting. So you don't break nothing off, but then again, these look like they're pretty robust. And the doors go in place, and I'm assuming that either means push down or they will click, one of the two. And yeah, wheels, pop the wheels in. Should look something like that. We've got another little component here on the front. Got some, I guess, probably fuel dump tubes. Another, I think that's an antenna of some sort. Some other little thingamajigger. Oh, very comprehensive gun turret. And of course, this one has got twin Vickers guns, one of which is mounted sideways. Okay. But of course we do have parts in there for a single Browning gun, so apparently there's going to be a different variant at some point. Gun turret plops in. So you'd probably want to test fit how well this part blends in with the fuselage so that you can leave the turret out, temporarily tack this into place so you can paint and weather and do all your finishing, and plug the turret in and stick that in permanently. Ah, okay, I misspoke. That Browning is not for a different gun turret. It is for the rearward facing, I think it was a Fraser Nash little remote controlled turret for lower rearward defense. And a lot of Blenheims had such a thing fitted as well. We got our torpedo going together, upper and lower halves. Tail with the propellers, the fuse, the big fins. You definitely want to take care of your seams here because these things were usually left in bare metal. You've got our little cradle for the torpedo, which you could have in with no torpedo or plonk the torpedo in itself. Note, when fitting torpedo, cut the doors from part C-17, discard middle part. Okay, so you need to use these outer doors. Got a pitot tube, got our wingtip lights, got our landing light. Hopefully all these fit well. Usually I recommend gluing these all in before paint so that you can sand them down if you have to, polish them up and blend them in nicely. Worst thing is gluing those on at the end and finding out that they don't fit at all. Ask me how I know. And you got your final Vickers gun going in if you chose to have that. Got a propeller with a little spinner on it. A few more little antennas and bits and bobs. And we have a finished Beaufort. So, first option. Flown by Ken Campbell, Victoria Cross, and of course, he wouldn't have known where he was going if it wasn't for a Canadian navigator, Sergeant J.P. Scott. These guys, of course, were attacking the Gneisenau, April 6, 1941. So a aircraft with a bit of a posterity. Standard dark earth, dark green over sky camouflage. Don't let the printed, never, some people they'd look, oh, well, that should be a sand and a brown. Don't ever trust the printed colors. Go off of the names and the callouts and, you know, reference material. So dark earth, dark green over sky, or aircraft flown against the Admiral Hipper, February of 1941, 217 Squadron. And this is in the Coastal Command scheme, extra dark sea gray, dark slate gray over black. So a couple of distinct. I know Extra Decal has at least one set of markings for the Beaufort as well, so if neither of these appeal to you, you can pick out one of those as well. And last but not least, the decals themselves. Typical Airfix, always done by Cartograph these days. Color is good, not super glossy, kind of a semi-gloss finish. Not quite thin, not overly thick. Not a lot of stencils, thankfully. We've got our instrument panel there. Clear is really tight. And I don't even think, no, there's not even any clear in the middle of that O. Or in the middle of the A, just a little bit connecting the two together. So minimal chances of silvering there. So that's good. Those should do quite nicely. So finally, Airfix's new Beaufort. About time. Been waiting for this thing for a while, although Our lucky buggers in Australia got their paws on these things pretty early. The rest of us here have had to patiently wait and, you know, build the stuff we already have, like a bunch of heathens. So nice to see a new kit of this relatively underappreciated aircraft. The only other examples were some rather crude special hobby examples. So it's nice to see a modern mainstream injection molded kit of this aircraft. Now, although there was no official Beaufort squadrons with the Royal Canadian Air Force, many Canadian pilots and crew did serve on them in Coastal Command, in the Channel, and in the Mediterranean. So definitely a bit of a Canadian connection with this aircraft. Of course, the Boxart aircraft did have a Canadian navigator on board. All in all, a decent looking effort from Airfix. Not too much to complain about, maybe a few too many ejector pins here and there, but overall I don't think they're going to be a big issue. Clear parts look pretty good. Doesn't seem to be a lot of questionable engineering, although I will say that plastic is a little greasy, so make sure you wash your hands before and after. This kit is of course available through the Wheels and Wings website, so you can head over there and pick one up. If you'd like to see more content like this, make sure to give us a like, hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time.